Hello and welcome to the Invader Historical Foundation YouTube channel. I'm Jonathan Claiborne. In this video, I'm going to talk about the 1989 Stephen Spielberg movie, Always. I was planning on doing this video a little later, but my friend Doyle pointed out something in the movie that I had never seen before, so it sent me down the rabbit hole, and here we are. I'll keep the movie review spoiler-free in case anyone has not seen it yet. There are some plot-related parts I need to talk about, but I'll make sure to save them for the end and point that out specifically so that if you don't want spoilers, you can stop there. The movie stars Richard Dreyfuss, Holly Hunter, Brad Johnson, and John Goodman. It also features Audrey Hepburn, who was paid $1 million for her part and donated her salary to UNICEF. It was Audrey Hepburn's final film before she passed away. The movie itself is actually a reboot of a 1943 film called A Guy Named Joe, directed by Victor Fleming. The original takes place during World War II with a bomber pilot, and Always features an aerial fire bomber team. Richard Dreyfuss and Stephen Speilberg traded quotes from A Guy Named Joe while filming Jaws, and that sparked Spielberg's interest in a remake. He is said to have seen the original film at least 35 times and credits it with the film that inspired him to become a director. A short clip of the film is also featured in the background on one of the TVs in Steven Spielberg's 1982 film Poltergeist. Despite being a story about fighting forest fires, not one single living tree was actually burned for the film. The fires were all done by miniature or by reigniting already burnt forests in Yellowstone under controlled conditions. The film's fire base, supposedly in Colorado, was actually filmed at an old B-17 training base in Ephrata, Washington. Many of the buildings were either originals from that time period or built specifically for the film. The character of Hap was originally supposed to be a guy, as he was in the original movie, and he was inspired by the famous Air Force General Hap Arnold. The planes in this film were furnished by Lynch Flying Service out of Billings, Montana, and they are painted in the actual Lynch livery. The pilots who flew the Invaders in the film were Denny Lynch, the owner of Lynch Flying Service, and Stephen Hinton, one of Denny's pilots. Hinton is still flying today and has recently been tapped by Kermit Weeks of Fantasy of Flight to fly the newly restored 4139401. Many people, when talking about this movie, refer to the plane from Always, but in truth, more than one plane was used in the film. The film used 3 actual Invaders, 2 of which were from Lynch Flying Service. Tanker number 57, which was an A-26C, civil registered as N9425Z, serial number 4435721. Tanker number 59 was an A-26C, civil registry number N4818E, serial number 4435371. Although there is a tanker number 47 that shows up in the background of one shot about an hour and 37 minutes into the movie, this plane was actually number 57, and they repainted it as 47 to make the tanker base look busier, according to Randy Lynch, son of the owner of the plane. The third Invader was used to film cockpit scenes on the ground in California. It is civil registry number N8026E, and it can be seen at the end of the film when Dorinda is switching off the radio. This plane is ex-US Air Force serial number 4435323. The plane still exists today as A. Holland and is on display at the Planes of Fame Museum in Chino, California. The film also used custom-built scale models of the planes in 1/5 scale. There were 2 PBY Catalinas and 6 A-26 Invader models built. The scale model Invaders had a wingspan of 14 feet and a length of 10 feet 3 inches. A glimpse of this can be seen when there are 2 number 59 tankers sitting side by side on the tarmac These are both models. There were several scenes which show tanker number 57, and right behind the cockpit is a strange box on top of the fuselage. It is not standard equipment on an Invader. I've been told by Randy Lynch, the son of Denny, that this box was a cooler of some kind for firefighting equipment, although he could not remember exactly what for. In this next section, I'm going to talk about spoilers within the film's plot itself. So if you have not seen the movie, you may want to stop here and I'll catch you next time. If you're still here, I assume you're okay with spoilers or you've already seen the film. One of the film's pivotal moments happens about 30 minutes into the film. Richard Dreyfuss's port engine catches fire and the plane explodes into a fireball. The question that I get asked a lot is, would this really happen? How realistic is this? I'll start by saying yes, not only can this happen, it has happened with at least one Invader where the engine caught fire and the plane exploded. I'll be covering this in detail in a couple upcoming videos. For now, just know that this has been recorded as fact for this plane. The emergency procedures for fighting engine fires have changed over the years. The 1944 Pilot's Handbook says this: fire hazard aboard the A-26 is negligible. Few fires have been reported in training. However, combat operations make your knowledge of the firefighting in flight important. Besides combat emergencies, fires can be ignited by electrical wiring shorting out or gasoline coming into contact with hot metal parts. There are two types of fires: gas or oil fires and electrical fires. For fuel or oil fires, if the engine catches fire, it is a fuel or oil fire. Turn the fuel selector switch to that engine off immediately. Cut the mixture to the fuel to idle cutoff. Close the throttle. Feather the engine. Turn the magneto switch off. Close the cowl flaps. If this does not extinguish the fire, side slip the plane away from the fire if you have plenty of altitude. The 1953 Invader Handbook for Flight Instructions lists some important changes to the emergency procedures for engine fires. It states, on late airplanes, a fire extinguishing system is provided. Red indicator lights which indicate fire in the engine section may be installed in the pilot's electrical control panel. In case of an engine fire, if altitude and other conditions permit, proceed as follows: propeller, feather, mixture control, idle cutoff, fuel tank selector valve, both off, cross-feed and bomb bay tank selector valve off or to the unaffected engine. Engine and hydraulic oil shut off, closed. Release carbon dioxide charge, if installed, to the engine of fire as soon as the engine stops. Cowl flaps to 1/4 open. Engine ignition switch off. Do not attempt to restart the engine again. Open the emergency exits. Land as soon as possible in order to determine the cause of the fire and correct the condition before continuing flight. If fire cannot be controlled, abandon the airplane. Note that in both versions, important steps are to close off the fuel supply to the affected engine. If this is not done, the fire can travel down the fuel lines and erupt the fuel tanks, which is exactly what happens in the film and in the recorded instance I'm aware of. In the film, Dreyfuss's character was busy trying to pull out of a dive, so he didn't notice the fire right away. The other scene, towards the end of the film, shows Holly Hunter's plane experiencing an oil pressure failure, and she ends up ditching the plane into the lake. She's already jettisoned her slurry. The plane is light, which is a good thing. She doesn't have any other crew aboard to jettison loose equipment, and the oil pressure problem prevents her from using up extra fuel. She did miss several important steps in the emergency checklist. First is to jettison the hatches on approach. This allows for an easier egress from the plane and helps prevent the water pressure from keeping the hatch closed. She struggled with this in the film as a result and had to wait for the cockpit to fill with water before she could open the hatch. The checklist also suggests turning on the formation and landing lights to help illuminate the water after splashdown. It calls for partially inflating the life jacket with 1 or 2 breaths. This is obviously an easier task with extra crew members. In combat, the pilots would often wear these on the missions so the inflate tubes were always within reach at all times. Once you fully egress the plane, then it says to inflate the life jacket the rest of the way. The checklist also calls for setting the flaps between 25 and 38 degrees and attempt to make a normal approach. Reduce the speed to just above stall speed and gently nose up right at the water so that the tail of the plane strikes first. This will allow the plane to float on the surface of the water for about a minute. She also could have enabled the emergency transponder. Civilian planes are required to carry an ELT beacon, which should go off by itself after crashing. But sending out an emergency call over the radio would have been prudent. Mostly all of this is just nitpick things that would have added some extra realism. I think Stephen Speilberg was probably trying to balance the image of portraying Dorinda as a competent pilot, but also as a heartbroken lover coming to terms with her life. To have the character follow all of these operational checklist items would have detracted from the emotional part of the scene. In any event, Always is a great, fun film, and I definitely recommend it if you haven't seen it. That's it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the movie. Until next time, thanks for watching.